Hey, friends, welcome back to The Noble Marriage, where we help couples through betrayal and healing in their marriage. I have missed talking to these guys.
I
I've
know.
missed you.
In
It has been
fact,
a while. It's like 2 months, 2.5 months.
yeah, we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But today's episode, we are so excited for because Mandy and Scott from Check Your Vertical podcast, you'll have to go check that out. Great podcast. They are friends of ours, and we just recently met them. And wow, they have a story that we wanted to bring to our channel and to you guys to give you hope and healing, that there is restoration on the other side of what you're going through.
Yeah, they've been through a lot of crisis, things that they walked through, and they're very transparent about their life, what they're going through, the pain and hurt, and how they're getting hope and healing and redemption on the other side. So check out their podcast, Check Your Vertical, and then you don't want to miss this episode.
I know that you guys are going to fall in love with them just like we did.
Scott and Mandy, welcome to our YouTube channel. So glad that you guys were able to join us. And I just wanted to share real quick about how we met you. We met you at WindShape Marriage Retreat as part of the Marriage Collective. Such a great opportunity to be able to go there and meet other marriage helpers, other marriage influencers, people who are really committed to a better marriage the way that God designed it to be. And just being able to hang out with you guys for 3 days in probably the most beautiful, serene, Holy Spirit filled environment was life-giving to us. It was such a joy to meet you guys, to hear your story, to cry with you, to worship with you, fellowship with you. And as soon as we heard your story, I told Adele, I was like, we have got to get them on our channel. We've got to hear their story.
And I said, Mandy is my soul sister. I
Yes.
already can tell.
Yes. And then Scott and I, we spent some time together hanging out. And I was like, man, I really love this dude. And I can't wait to have more of a relationship and chat. And man, I'm so grateful that you guys agreed to be on here. I'm so grateful that we have this opportunity. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you
Wow.
for having us.
Yes, thank you so much.
Funny story though, when in one of the mornings where I was going to get coffee and Adele came around the corner, she's like, "I'm listening to you in my ears." I'm like,
was?
"Oh no!" Like it was. She's like, "Your wife is my soul sister." I was like, hey, "Preach that, sister."
I was like, good, I need one of those.
Yeah,
It
your
so
hair was
cute.
like-
I went back. I said, "You won't believe it." She's like listening right now, like the podcast. She's like, "No, she's not." I'm like, "I promise you."
I was, because
Yeah, we are so thankful to be here. And I love how God is like the logistical master. He's so sovereign
Yeah.
in his plan that he brought us there. It's in an unexpected way, in an unexpected time, in an unexpected place. For our paths to collide so that we could be soul sisters, so that we could share our testimonies and, be a part of God's kingdom this way.
Well, I knew Travis and I hit it off right away because he like walked past me the night before and was like, "Dude, that beard is rocking." I was like,
That's right.
"Mutual feeling to you, bro."
it's
Yeah,
funny
man.
because men who have beards, they connect. I mean,
They get it.
it
They
just
get
is.
it.
It's awesome.
Exactly.
I even said leading into this, I said, how many comments do you think you get on your beard? Because it's such a thing. We go places and dudes will be like, great beard, dude.
Yeah,
Yep.
I love it. Because a lot of work goes into those beards, you know?
Right?
Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
things.
So one of the things that really resonated with me is your story. And I think the thing that resonates with our audience is stories. You know, when I think back to Jesus, I think back to how he taught anything was through a story. It really resonates. And so hearing your story is just captivating. And I would love for you to share. Tell us your story. What brings you to actually be right here in front of us right now?
Whew, all right, you ready? Buckle up.
Buckle up, right?
So we'll kind of start at our childhood because that matters. That is
Yeah.
our upbringing plays a role in our adult lives. So for me, my parents were divorced when I was 8. And up to that point, we were raised Catholic. And moving into that, my dad, after that, decided to go to attend a Baptist church. And by the time I was 10, I was baptized and accepted the Lord. I had a really good experience there with the church, thank goodness. where we did a lot of mission trips. I was very involved. That was my family. That was my life. And if you go to a Baptist church, you're there Wednesday, Sunday morning, Sunday night, potluck in between. You're doing the baseball team together. You've got all this stuff together. So I had a really great experience with the church. And then kind of moving into my teenage years, we moved away from where we attended. And so it was more difficult for my dad to bring us. And my junior year, I had just unintentionally drifted away from the Lord. I never meant to. I wasn't hurt in any way. I just like to call myself, I was a happy sinner. It didn't derive from any sort of attachment in my childhood. And what I noticed now looking back at that time, my parents kind of always were battling against each other. So it was more of like, I lived a life where I never heard no. So the saying, if you get enough freedom, you can hang yourself. That's what I did. Not everyone makes that choice, I understand. But for me, I drifted so much. I didn't really have any roots. And I didn't know how to say no to things. And so I got myself into a lot of trouble. And by the time in my senior year, I'm dating a guy who is, so different than who I ever was. And by 18, after I graduated, I was now pregnant. Yeah. And at 19, I had my first daughter. And I kind of moved into a season of unknown. I was not following the Lord at that time. You want to take yourself up to that point?
Yeah. So I grew up in a different home. We, Italian family. We did a lot together. Very strict. I wouldn't say faith was not introduced in my life at all. I didn't know God. I didn't know. The only version of like church I knew was my grandma Pisa, and she would take us there sometimes we were kids. And so, but after she passed, I never went to church. And so essentially, like, I just really grew up in a home of just working hard and, trying to be a good person. We all know that doesn't get you to heaven. I went through college, and really there was just so many insecurities, if I reflect back, of just who I am, just through my upbringing, my family, like details, which we're not talking about today. But like she said, they play a huge role in who we've become because of the environments that we've grown up in. And so there was a lot of baggage that I was carrying through my life, and because of that, I conducted myself in a certain way through college and work, and working at restaurants for a long time, being a bartender. So I really, up until I'm just going to fast forward. Really, lost my job in 2008, and it was really a big shot to me because I just bought a house and my first car and all these things. So I really my whole life was just around things, material things, and success. And that's what I was constantly. I put my trust and my faith in my checkbook, my banking account. I put my version of success in who I was becoming in work, and that's it. And I used a lot of people. And a lot of women in that point too. And so I didn't even know how bad it was. I was so blind to the person I had become. And so we actually then went to high school together, and we reconnected after almost a decade out of school randomly in 2009 in January. And we both were unemployed, and our story kind of starts from there as far as like how we've kind of gotten to this point.
But I'll back up a little bit. In that 10 years before I met him, once I had a daughter, I had this deep desire for a family in me that has always lived in me. I had no idea how to get it, though. I never saw it. I didn't have it growing up. I had parents that loved me unconditionally. Like, they did anything and everything for me. I was never felt unloved or unworthy or any of that. But I knew now I had a daughter, and I desired a family. And I wasn't chasing God. And so I got myself into a lot of trouble this way. I had my brother-in-law and sister, I always looked at their marriage. They had a beautiful marriage that was after the Lord. And by the time I was in my early 20s, I just remember thinking, that's something I'll never have. I do not deserve that because of the things that I had already done. And so I got myself into some really bad relationships that caused a lot of pain. Just seeking a family. And I have, through that time, I mean, there's so much in there, but I really ended up out of a 5-year relationship with a functioning alcoholic that was just so mentally abusive. I had no idea who I was at that point. I had made decisions for my career and things that I did to make money. I remember at one point, I told my cat, the only one I told, I'm going to hell. And so I had always this moral knowing in me, but I was so deep in, and I had so much guilt and shame surrounding around what I had done. When you're in there, it's just so hard to get out. So about 2008, when he's referring there was, I had found myself now broke, homeless, jobless, living out of a suitcase with my daughter, living in my best friend's boyfriend's spare bedroom. And this is a point where the Lord said, "You ready?" And I ran my butt back to the Lord. And it was through, I started Christian counseling immediately. And that church had a single mom's ministry that I immediately got connected with. It was in these moments where the Lord began to grow roots in me that I didn't know he was growing and planting these seeds that were going to play a role in my life. One of the main things that the counselor looked at me and said over and over again, because I was lying, that I was living an untruthful life for the protection of myself, knowing that if the truth were to come out, my life would be destroyed, what people would think of me. I couldn't even stand the fact of what would happen if they knew. But every time I meet with her, she said, "But are you lying?" And I would say, "Yes, of course, but here's why. Do you know what will happen to me if I'm honest and tell the truth? And these people, they don't deserve the truth. They're going to destroy me with it." So through the ministry, single moms ministry, I remember the first one I went to, I never even looked up. I had my face down, tears pouring down by my face, and just women just coming by and patting me on my back and telling me they were praying for me. They left me their phone numbers. I had never experienced anything like this in my life. And it was actually through these months here that I was able to be strong for the first time ever. And I stood up to this guy who was dating and said, I'm done. I'm gone. I can't do this anymore. So that coming out of that, so I did, when I called him, I told him I finally had this moment at the single moms ministry that is so powerful. And this is when the Lord got a hold of my heart. It was a free book night they were giving away. And I grabbed a book. I had no idea. I had never read a book. And especially in this area, I'm not a book reader, so I do read now, just so you know. At that point, I had not picked up a book. And I went home and laid on the bed, and I opened this book up, and it was a book that matches scriptures with feelings. And I looked up shame. That was the first feeling I looked up. And the first verse said, Romans 10:11, anyone who trusts in the Lord shall not feel shame. And it was in that moment I got it. The scales fell off. I saw the Lord for who he was. I was like, why am I giving a man power over me? Because he doesn't say who I am. My God says who I am. I can't feel shame. He can't make me feel shame. If he says I'm forgiven, I'm forgiven. I picked up the phone and I made phone calls, and I became truthful. And I just say the Lord just protected me. I had no care in the world about what they were going to go do with that information. And from there, I skipped into my days. I got a job. It was horrible, business to business, outdoor sales. And I was literally skipping and joyful. Like, it was raining at times, and I'm like singing in the rain. Like, I just felt so free. And it was unnecessarily free. I still had no money. I still had no place to live. You know, all the situation was still there, but I was free. And so that kind of moves us into January of 2009, of when Scott and I ran into each other. We're both, basically have no life happening at that point.
Well, what confused me, I still don't know why you even chose to talk to me. Like, you were in such a different place. I was in a depressive state of my life, questioning who I was as a person. And so for some reason,
why. Do you want me to tell you why?
Yeah, I go ahead.
I finally had stepped into the fact that I would accept dates, and I would try to see how much free sushi I could get. I wanted dinners. And so when you came and talked to me, first of all, and I had no idea what your problems were. And he's like, you want to go to dinner? I'm like, sure. How about sushi?
Master of disguise over here. Yeah. Well, and so this is weird though, because when we finally ran back in, I know we're probably dragging this out. So we bumped back in each other. We hadn't spoken to each other in 10 years. So we never dated in high school. We never really had classes together. We knew each other. We were friends, but it was like catching up. And then she was like, oh, I'm going to church. And I'm like, and she's like, and that's, where I'm at. I'm like, well, I want to go to church. And I was in my mind, she was thinking like, I'm just trying to hit on her. And maybe I don't really know, but I felt this weird, something had to start changing in my life, but I had I didn't even know what Easter was about, guys. Like, that's how illiterate I was about the gospel. Okay. And I really mean that. And so,
I didn't want him to come.
She did not want me to come.
It was my space and place with the Lord. And when he's like, I want to come to church, I'm like, ugh, fine. I was just so annoyed because I'm still in an emotional state. I still sat in the back of the church because the second tears came for me. I was out. Nobody was going to see me that way. Yeah. So you came.
I did. I did come. And then I think, God started working on me. And I attended my first men's group. I remember sitting around this table with 10 guys. And they're talking about this guy that got eaten by a whale. And I'm like, in the Bible, they're like flipping right through it. I'm like, what is going on? And so I'm just so confused. And finally, a couple years in, I finally did accept the Lord at this random church in Youngstown by this little Hispanic preacher. And I was like crying in the whole thing. Now I think this is where everything starts to kind of happen for us. Even though I accepted Jesus, there was still a lot of things that were underneath that were just never addressed. And, that I literally brought into our marriage. It was like, I explained sometimes, like I took my dump truck of problems that I really didn't even know I had because I was so tied to the behaviors of my family and dumped them into our marriage. And then, I know a lot of times people talk about in marriage about leaving and cleaving, and I didn't do that. I was very attached to my family still, and I was not in a unified covenant bond relationship that I had made with the Lord and her, but I still had this tie to my family that I just refused to almost let go of, and I tried to play this middle ground. And so this is when our marriage really started to struggle because I just didn't understand. And up until this point, we had dated for a few years, and we never argued. We really thought we were kind of in this untouchable, like, wow, we are so good together.
We're so wrong.
But we were so wrong, right? And so I really started to feel like I made a poor decision, and that with marrying you, and that I had this woman and she has this daughter, and maybe my parents are right, maybe this is and so I started to buy into these lies, and so I think what started to expose was the inner root issues of my heart that I didn't even know had. And so by the first 2 years of our marriage, I was already checked out.
Well, in those first 2 years, the enemy came at us hard. We got married, I think, understanding that you both love Jesus. And that was true. I believe he loved Jesus, and I did too, but our foundations were so different. Mm-hmm. We didn't know this then. So, we've kind of used the visual of, house built on rock or sand. And within a month of getting married, the storm came hard. And my house was built on rock because of my testimony. I was unwavering. I was never going back to that old Mandy and that old life. He was so new. And so when the storm came, it just ripped half my house off. And I had no idea what was happening. So for Scott, it all came as the triggers that would connect to him. Is anyone taking notes on that? I just want to make sure that
I do. It's just I'm like, gosh, man, like it is crazy how when I think about all the things, I'm like, Lord, like how does she remember all this?
This is actually a very common issue. And the brain is designed to black things out like that. Mm-hmm. And so same thing with our story. He doesn't remember a lot of the things. The Holy Spirit has brought it back over time as we've asked for information. But it's very common, and we hear it from couples we work with regularly.
Yeah, and before you keep going, I just wanted to share a little bit about what you're talking about in a background, Scott, because you talked about being transformed in your heart by Jesus prior to this. But I think what's important for our audience to get is you can be transformed in your heart by Jesus. And it's immediate. It's immediate. But what we need to learn is, what we all need to know is there is a spiritual order of living. There is a spirit, a soul, and a body. If we don't come into a spiritual order of being spirit-led, man, like Scott's talking about, his soul and his body, he's been programming those through his family for years. And so if we're not spirit-led, even though we're transformed by Christ immediately, there's a sanctification that has to take place with the soul and the body that Scott hasn't had the ability to do that yet, hasn't had an opportunity.
So that took us to April 15, and Scott had the wherewithal to tell me that he spoke to a divorce attorney. And I can't tell you, I was crushed. So I remember going for a car ride, and I was grieving, obviously, that he would do that. But I was also like, gosh, I kind of get it. Like, we were really in a bad place. I was a lot of grace for a phone call, and it's just like a moment of weakness. And it was in that moment, I, for the first time ever, had no reason to feel this way or think this way. I heard the Lord say, you need to ask him. And I knew in me what that meant. That meant ask him if you had an affair. And now I found myself in an argument with the Lord in the car. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. No, I would not, my husband, not my marriage. I'm not asking him that. He would never. But that feeling was in me in that moment. And so he came back, and we talked, and we reconciled, and he was crying, and we had a good week. And then
and that was a common theme with me. Just an undisciplined spiritual leader. It was very high highs and very low lows in our daily interaction. And that's what our marriage had become, this, volatile explosions, crash, remorse, and apology, fix it, get back on the cycle, like this crazy cycle that honestly was more damaging than it was anything, because all it did was just create these tendencies that would eventually turn into what transpired. But it was more damaging to us than it was anything. But I didn't know any different, because that's how I was raised. Yeah. You explode, but it was different. In my house, we didn't get apologies, but for some reason, the Lord kept giving me this like grace. I mean, if I look back, just the understanding, like, hey, that was not right. But I still didn't know how to control any of this at all. It was almost like out of a natural, this is what I do type of thing.
And so within a week, I knew. One morning I said, I just got to ask you a question, and I don't want to ask you what the Lord's telling me to. And, I said, did you have an affair? And from there,
I couldn't talk. I remember that day. That's one day I do remember. I was a coward, man. And eventually got around to saying that something happened. And really, I put myself in a place of saying that something happened enough to just please the question, and thinking that I was honest enough to say, hey, yeah, I did, but it was nothing like big, And so, I mean, she was crushed either way. And in that moment, I was in like this like fight or flight, right? Like I didn't know how to, I was scared, but I'm like, well, we can salvage this, and I'll just kind of keep this off to the side. And yet I'm just going to tell her enough, because I don't want to lose my wife and my kids. And, so I was just almost like this response of saying just enough truth to not hurt her too much.
Self-preservation.
So go ahead.
I said self-preservation.
Yes, self-preservation, correct.
So this is our D-Day 1 that we call that. And I'll say one of the greatest gifts that the Lord has ever given to me, and then I will praise him until the Lord takes me home, is that he gave me the ability to see Scott the way that the Lord made him, and not the way the world molded him to be. So every time he would act, I'd see, like, this isn't my husband. This isn't who he is now. But I could see the wrestling and the molding, the attachments to all the other stuff behind him. Mm-hmm. And so it was just this constant grace that the Lord shown me in him. And so I at that point, I asked him, I said, please just tell me the truth. Like, I still want our marriage. Again, I went back to, like, I kind of have grace for a moment. I understood.
Which is mind-blowing. That alone is mind-blowing. To think that, like, the Lord gave you that, like, oh, even in a moment of weakness. Most people don't do that.
Well, I've been there. Again, right. That's why, my story matters. I understand. And I had been forgiven previously, so I knew I understood a moment. And then I kind of went back and through counseling, we were immediately in counseling, and just thinking of those 4 months, like, wow, I really played a big role in this. Mm-hmm. And kind of wearing that as it was on me.
And I didn't do her any favors. I made sure that I made it known that this was on her. and that I wasn't doing counseling before this, but I will say out of desperation, that was the first time I agreed to go to counseling. Because I saw like this was probably the only chance I had to even somewhat reconcile what I had, done.
Mm-hmm.
So for 5 years, we went on this journey. And, I look back on our journey, and it's just crazy how our life was, going along, but there were so many other things in our life. And we're not talking about that, but they played a role in like how our marriage has always been. We've always been on like the edge of our seats as life has been clipping by with deaths, sickness, surgeries, just many different things that could potentially crush most couples. And yet we still were persevering. And it was only because of him in these moments, yet there was still just this linger. Yeah. So this is where now, like, I truly, like, the Lord grabbed my heart. And, there was a day that I remember, like, I just was looking in the mirror, and I looked at everything I was doing. I mean, guys, I'm going to Bible study. I'm fellowshipping with other Christian men in church. I'm doing service things. Like, I'm doing the Christian checklist. Yet I'm over here being an adulterer, showing up on Fridays after being with a person the night before and acting like I'm a hypocrite. And there was a point I walked into my bathroom. I said, I can't even look at myself anymore. Like I didn't even want to be living because I was so disgusted with who I had become and the depths of the truth that I had buried and buried and buried. And so for some reason, the pandemic happened. Obviously, many people's lives got rocked and changed. And so during COVID, there was a program that I don't know why the Lord chose this. Man, I don't know why the Lord chose this program. But it was a gentleman named Garrett White, and he had a program called Wake Up Warrior. But he spoke with direct fire. He spoke with directness that was so piercing, and it wasn't even gospel. It was just piercing truth. But when I think about it, like the power of the gospel, and like Hebrews talks about, like the word, right, is like a double-edged sword, right, that pierces the heart. And when you, as I started to, like, I was still in my Bible and I was reading scripture, and I'm like, what am I doing? What am I actually doing? And for some reason, this guy ran this first online challenge, and I decided, like, I needed to do this. Now, guys, I had no money. I had lost my job. There was, like, nothing good going on in my life. I actually had to not pay something to pay for the actual online course, okay? And it was only like $100. So I start this course and this challenge, and I remember getting into the first week going, I started to feel something I had never felt before. All these things that I had buried were starting to come up. Feelings of betrayal, the real shame, the guilt. The guilt started to weigh on me, and those were the moments when I was in the mirror saying, I can't live with myself anymore, and I don't even know if I can do this. And there was something in about the first week that Garrett had said, and he's like, it wasn't very Christian, but it was stop bleeping lying. And he really talked about, like, we can tell ourselves lies, right, by two ways. We can say lies, right? Those are acts of commission, like lies of commission, what we say. Or we can have lies of omission. And those are the sneaky ones, because this is where we start to gather justification and resentment and things, because we are able to tell ourselves something that we omit, and we can justify it because it's what the enemy wants to do. He wants to say, hey, it's okay that you do this. It's okay to watch a little bit of porn. You want to go jerk off? Go ahead, buddy. It's okay. She's not watching. These are the omitting truths that are in our life if we start to let them seep in. And in that moment, the Lord, like, it was like instantly, he grabbed me and said, you've omitted truth from your wife. You have kept a dark secret around the actual doings of your affair and the infidelity that you had. And you need to tell her. And I asked, and I said, do I have to tell her? And it was very clear. And it was coming from a place of, like, you either do this now or your life, it's going to be done. And, but the only catch was that through this, I started to realize that it didn't matter what the outcome was for our marriage or our family. We had more kids now. There was more to lose. But for some reason, God said, if you don't fix this, It's never going to be right for you. But I need you to fix it with me. It wasn't about repairing my marriage. And I looked in the mirror and I said, it's now or never, And so I walked downstairs and I guys, I still was a coward. Like I couldn't even say it. I could not even say it. And it's crazy to me that like just being a man, like I couldn't even be a man about it. I had to loft up this ridiculously open-ended comment that was a no-brainer. And in that moment, it was like this 10,000-pound gorilla that had jumped off my back. But at the same time, I watched my life just slam the door, walk the other way. I said, that's it. But it was like at this point, like I mentioned just a minute ago, I just knew like I had to get my relationship right with the Lord. It mattered, obviously. Like I didn't want to lose my family or my marriage, but my life, my relationship with Jesus was on the line, I felt like, and I needed to repent. And that's exactly what I did.
You may have been wondering, where have Travis and Adelle been? We have been up to so much over here at the Noble Marriage.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out how can we best support you? How can we get resources out to you for hope and healing? And it's all over the world. We have people that are watching our channel, reaching out to us, and we want to best support you.
Yes.
So what are we doing?
In this time that we've been taking a little break while we've been putting some interviews out for you guys, we've been writing our book, our first final draft. Our first draft is finished, and we are still in the phases of tweaking it and really just allowing the Lord to lead us in how we're going to close the ending.
Lately, Adelle and I have been working a good bit with marriage intensives, and you may be a couple that needs rapid healing. Check out our website for the options on intensives. As well as we're working on an online marriage intensive. We have been contacted by couples from South Africa, from Europe, from Mexico, and we want to help you so bad. And I know it's difficult and challenging to be able to travel. So an online intensive may be right for you. We're not there yet. Stay tuned.
Yeah. As well as we've been revamping our academy to make it more effective to get healing in your home, in your own comfort space, being able to connect as a couple through that. We now have 5 programs on there that will actively improve your marriage and actively improve your life. So be sure and check that out. And so much more is coming in the future. So excited about that.
I highly recommend the communication course.
Yes, that one is so good. You know, a lot of times people think that Travis and I have it all figured out. Like our marriage is just good all the time and we don't have issues anymore.
You weren't here last week.
Yeah. We have really been dealing with a lot of spiritual warfare. And we've come to realize that in this ministry where the Holy Spirit is leading, we are creating a lot of friction in the spiritual realm. And so we covet your prayers over our ministry. Like we feel it when people are praying for us. And we've also been planning for the beginning of the year. You know, we realize that when we give God the first of everything, right?
Yeah.
The first of the year. And for us, we do the whole month of January where we just dedicate that to God and we focus on Him and what He wants for our ministry moving forward. He takes care of the rest of the 11 months in the year. And so we've also been prepping and planning and how we're going to take a shift in our channel. And I think it's going to be something that you are going to be so excited about. Yeah, we have some awesome, exciting things. So you're going to want to stay tuned to our channel. And with that, we just want to say thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Adelle and I want to share our gratitude with you.
Yeah.
Every time you like a video, comment, share it, subscribe to our channel, when you're doing that, you're making a difference for other couples. You know, the YouTube algorithm, the way it works is anytime you engage with it, it says, oh, people want to see that. And so they start sending it out even more to people just like you who need healing in your marriage.
Because of your support, more couples are being reached all over the world. And one of the things we've seen is we've been able to give away more scholarships because of the support that we received. You know, our ministry is what we do full time. This is how we make a living. It's how we support other couples. And so several of you have asked, how can we support you? And so we just want to share, here's a couple of other ways that you can support us. One of those is connecting with us on social media. You know, we've had a lot of you connect with us, share your stories. We love to hear from our audience. It tells us where you guys are and what it is you want to be hearing. You know, hitting the like button while you're watching the video. It also tells YouTube, send this out to more people.
One of the key ways you could support us is through your prayer. Please pray for our lives, our family, our purity of our hearts, the decisions that we make, how we steward the resources that God gives us, and specifically how we speak into other marriages, that it would be
Yes.
God honoring and that it would be uplifting and pleasing to Jesus.
Yes, and then if you feel led to give to another couple for a scholarship, Travis is going to put a link in the description below where you can go check out how you can do that and how you can pay it forward for other couples to get the healing that they desperately need. Oh, you want me to start? Welcome.
Sure, or I'll be glad to.
Okay. I thought you said you were going to.
I said, sure. You said, do you want me to start? I was like, sure, or I would be glad to.
Yeah, that
But you didn't
threw me
respond,
off.
so I thought, well, she's going to go. And you didn't.
I guess I thought that meant you were doing it. So I was just like, okay, I'm good with that. But I just waited.
You did. Yeah.
Hey, friends.
Hey, welcome back.
You.
You're funny.
You.
All right.
Our daughter's going to wonder, what in the world
I know.
kind of video are we making?
Right.
And then we'll do a little yeah,
What does that mean?
something transition.
Oh, transition.
I'm editing in my mind, you know.
That's a transition.
Yeah, that's a transition.
I like that. Yes.
All right, I'll start since
Okay.
you were talking. You did a great job.
Thanks.
What did I say I was going to say?
Hey, you may be wondering, where have we been?